The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Medical Center buzzed overhead as I gripped Derek's cold hand through the hospital bed railing. The machines beeped in steady rhythm, monitoring the heart that had nearly stopped beating just 4 hours earlier. A heart attack at 37. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. But as I sat there in the sterile intensive care unit, watching my husband's chest rise and fall under crisp white sheets, I had no idea that luck had nothing to do with what was about to unfold. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Thomas Brennan stood in the doorway, his weathered face creased with something that looked less like concern and more like determination. He was holding a manila folder, the edges worn from handling, and when our eyes met, he asked quietly, "Mrs. Hayes, when Derek wakes up, are you going to be ready for the truth?" I nodded, not understanding what truth he meant. 3 days later, Derek wasn't just awake. He was ruined. The call came at 2:17 on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of uploading photos to my photography portfolio website, sipping lukewarm coffee and debating whether the lighting in a series of landscape shots needed adjustment. My phone vibrated against the wooden desk, an unknown number flashing across the screen. I almost didn't answer. Spam calls had become so frequent lately that I developed a habit of letting everything go to voicemail unless I recognized the caller. Something made me pick up. Maybe intuition. Maybe fate. Maybe just the peculiar timing of a call during work hours when most robocallers seem to operate early morning or evening. "Is this Lauren Hayes?" The voice was professional, clipped, female. There was an undertone of practiced calm that people in emergency services develop, the kind that's meant to keep you from panicking before they've delivered the news. "Yes, this is Lauren," I replied, already feeling my stomach tighten. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Angela Brooks, a nurse at St. Catherine's Medical Center. Your husband Derek was brought in about 20 minutes ago. He's suffered a cardiac event at his workplace. He's stable now, but you should come to the hospital as soon as possible." The words hit me like physical blows. Cardiac event. Hospital. Stable now. The qualifier in that last phrase stood out with terrifying clarity. Stable now meant he hadn't been stable before. Stable now meant something had gone terribly wrong. "I don't understand," I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant and unfamiliar. "Derek is 37. He runs 3 times a week. He just had a physical last month. I understand this is shocking, Mrs. Hayes. The doctors will explain everything when you arrive. Can you get here safely, or would you like us to send someone?" "No, I can drive. I'm leaving now." I don't remember hanging up the phone. I don't remember grabbing my purse or locking the front door of our Beaverton home. The next clear memory I have is sitting in traffic on Highway 26, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, tears blurring my vision as I tried to process what was happening. Derek had kissed me goodbye that morning at 6:30, complaining about an early meeting with the development team at Westview Technology Solutions. He'd grabbed his protein shake from the refrigerator, straightened his tie in the hallway mirror, and walked out the door like he had every workday for the past 5 years. How does someone go from drinking a protein shake to having a heart attack in less than 8 hours? The parking garage at St. Catherine's was a concrete maze that seemed designed to disorient people already in crisis. I finally found a spot on the 4th level, my hands still shaking as I fed coins into the meter. The elevator took forever, stopping at every floor to admit or discharge people whose emergencies seemed less urgent than mine. A woman with a sleeping toddler. An elderly man with a walker. A teenage boy with his arm in a makeshift sling. The intensive care unit was on the 7th floor. The doors required a call button and clearance from the nurse's station, another barrier between me and Derek that made my chest tighten with frustration and fear. When the doors finally clicked open, I was met by the same professional calm I'd heard on the phone. "Lauren Hayes," I said to the nurse at the desk, my voice cracking. "My husband Derek was brought in." "Room 712, she replied, already reaching for a clipboard. "Dr. Harper is with him now. I'll let them know you've arrived." Room 712 was at the end of a long hallway lined with identical doors, each one concealing its own private crisis. Through some of the small windows, I could see families gathered around beds, their faces drawn with exhaustion and worry. The whole floor hummed with quiet urgency, a controlled chaos that spoke of life and death decisions being made behind closed doors. When I reached 712, I paused outside, my hand on the door handle. Part of me didn't want to open it, didn't want to see what waited on the other side. As long as I stood in this hallway, Derek was still the healthy man who'd kissed me goodbye that morning. Opening this door meant accepting a new reality, one where my husband's heart had betrayed him before he'd even reached 40. I pushed the door open. Derek looked so small in that hospital bed. He was a tall man, 6'2", broad-shouldered from years of recreational basketball and those morning runs. But surrounded by machines and monitors, with 4 lines snaking from his arms and oxygen tubes in his nose, he looked diminished. Vulnerable. His face was pale, his usually neat dark hair disheveled, and his eyes were closed. For a terrifying moment, I thought I was too late. Mrs. Hayes. A man in a white coat turned from studying one of the monitors. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'm Dr. Kenneth Harper. Your husband is sedated right now, but he's stable. That word again. Stable. What happened? I moved closer to the bed, reaching for Derek's hand. His skin felt cool and dry, so different from the warm grip I was used to. Dr. Harper pulled up a chair, gesturing for me to sit. The fact that he was sitting down himself told me this was going to be a long conversation. Derek suffered what we call an acute myocardial infarction. A heart attack. According to his coworkers, he complained of chest pain and shortness of breath around 1:30. By the time the ambulance arrived, he'd lost consciousness. The paramedics had to use an AED to restore normal rhythm. The room tilted slightly. They had to shock his heart? Yes. But they got him back quickly, and we've placed 2 stents to open the blocked arteries. He's young and otherwise healthy, which works in his favor. But Mrs. Hayes, I need to ask you some questions about his medical history and lifestyle. What followed was a surreal interrogation about my husband's life. Did he smoke? Occasionally, but he'd quit 2 years ago. Did he use recreational drugs? Never. Family history of heart disease? His father had high blood pressure, but nothing serious. Stress levels? I paused at that question. Derek's job was demanding. He was a senior project manager at Westview, often working late, bringing his laptop home on weekends. But he'd always seemed to handle it well. He works a lot, I admitted. But he never complained about being stressed. He loves his job. Dr. Harper made a note on his chart. We'll need to run more tests, but given his age and apparent health, I suspect there may be contributing factors we haven't identified yet. We'll know more in the next 24 to 48 hours. For now, the best thing you can do is be here when he wakes up. He left me alone with Derek and the machines. I pulled my chair closer to the bed, holding Derek's hand between both of mine, trying to will warmth back into his fingers. The monitor above his bed showed his heart rate in steady green peaks and valleys. 62 beats per minute. A heart that had stopped and been shocked back to life. I don't know how long I sat there. Time moved strangely in that room, simultaneously crawling and racing. Nurses came and went, checking monitors, adjusting 4 drips, speaking in low voices about medications whose names I didn't recognize. At some point, someone brought me a cup of terrible coffee that I drank anyway, needing something to do with my hands. It was almost 6 o'clock when I heard voices outside the door. Not medical staff this time, but civilians. Visitors. A moment later, the door opened and 3 people entered, and everything began to change. Thomas Brennan came in first. I recognized him from the company holiday party last December, though Derek and I had only spoken to him briefly. He was in his late 50s, with gray hair and a face that had seen a lot of years in corporate America. Behind him came 2 others. A younger woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. And a man about Derek's age, wearing khakis and a polo shirt with the Westview Technology Solutions logo embroidered on the chest. "Mrs. Hayes," Thomas said quietly. "I'm Thomas Brennan. I work with Derek. This is Rita Vasquez, his assistant, and Marcus Chen from accounting. We wanted to check on him." "Thank you for coming," I said automatically, the social pleasantries kicking in even through my exhaustion. "The doctors say he's stable. They had to put in stents, but he should be okay." Rita's face crumpled, and she turned away, her shoulders shaking. Marcus put a hand on her arm, murmuring something too low for me to hear. Thomas moved closer to the bed, looking down at Derek with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't just concern. There was something else there. Something harder. "Mrs. Hayes," Thomas said after a long moment, "would you step outside with me for a minute? There's something you need to know." The way he said it made my blood run cold. "What do you mean? What's wrong?" "Nothing medical," he assured me quickly. "Derek's going to recover from the heart attack." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But there are things about today, about why this happened, that you should hear from me before he wakes up and tries to explain it himself. I looked from Thomas to Rita, who was still crying silently, to Marcus, who wouldn't meet my eyes. A sick feeling was spreading through my chest, different from the fear and worry that had consumed me since the phone call. "What kind of things?" I asked. Thomas glanced at Derek's unconscious form, then back at me. "Things about who your husband really is. About what he's been doing at work. About why his heart gave out at 37. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle but firm. "Mrs. Hayes, Lauren, your husband has been living a double life, and it caught up with him today." The machines continued their steady beeping. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. And in that sterile hospital room, with my husband unconscious and 3 strangers watching me with pity in their eyes, I felt the foundation of my world begin to crack. "I don't understand," I whispered. Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out the manila folder I would later come to think of as the evidence file. "I know you don't. But you will. The question is, are you ready to hear it?" I looked at Derek, at the man I'd married 6 years ago in a small ceremony at Multnomah Falls, the man I'd bought this house with, the man whose child I'd been planning to start trying for next year. The man who'd kissed me goodbye that morning without a hint that our entire life together might be a carefully constructed lie. "Tell me," I said. Thomas opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, bank statements, photographs, and text message screenshots. He spread them across the small rolling table near Derek's bed like a prosecutor laying out evidence. My eyes skipped across them, not yet comprehending, seeing fragments that didn't make sense together. A dinner receipt from Riverside Bistro dated 3 weeks ago. I'd been at a client meeting that night. A hotel confirmation from the Heathman Lodge. Text messages with someone named V, full of heart emojis and intimate language that made my stomach turn. "Derek has been having an affair with Vanessa Morgan from the marketing department for about 8 months, Thomas said, his voice matter of fact, as if he were delivering a quarterly report. "But that's not why I'm here. Plenty of men have affairs. What your husband did goes far beyond infidelity." Rita spoke up for the first time, her voice thick with tears. "He used me to cover it up. Made me lie about his whereabouts, book hotel rooms under my name, send flowers to her apartment using the company account. I told him it was wrong. I told him he was going to get caught." Marcus stepped forward, pulling a specific page from the folder. It was a spreadsheet, rows and columns of numbers that meant nothing to me at first glance. For the past year, Derek has been siphoning money from client accounts. Small amounts, spread across multiple projects, buried in budget overruns and equipment purchases that never happened. We're talking about roughly $230,000. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. $230,000. I thought about our modest house, our 10-year-old cars, the vacation we'd postponed because we were saving for a larger down payment on a future home. While I'd been clipping coupons and shopping sales, my husband had stolen $250,000. Why? I managed to ask. Why would he do that? Thomas pointed to another set of papers. Bank statements for an account I'd never seen before, registered to Derek Hayes at an address in the Pearl District. Vanessa's address, I would later learn. He was living two lives, Thomas explained. You got the responsible husband playing house in Beaverton. Vanessa got the generous boyfriend with the downtown loft, the expensive dinners, the weekend trips to the coast. He was supporting both lives simultaneously, and his salary wasn't enough to cover it. I felt like I was floating outside my body, watching this conversation happen to someone else. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be Derek, who balanced our checkbook meticulously, who insisted we brown bag our lunches to save money, who told me just last month that we needed to cut back on streaming services. Today, it all came crashing down, Thomas continued. The company's annual audit started this morning. Marcus found the discrepancies around lunchtime. We confronted Derek at 1:15. He denied everything at first, but when we showed him the evidence, he just collapsed. Literally. Grabbed his chest and went down. Rita was crying harder now. I called 911. I tried to help him, even after everything. Marcus did CPR until the paramedics came. You saved his life, I said numbly. Maybe we shouldn't have, Marcus muttered, then immediately looked guilty. I'm sorry. That was inappropriate. Thomas closed the folder. The company called the police about an hour ago. They'll want to talk to Derek when he wakes up. There will be charges. Embezzlement, fraud, possibly more depending on what else they uncover. The room was spinning. My husband was a thief. An adulterer. A liar so accomplished he'd fooled me completely for 8 months, possibly longer. And now he was also going to be a criminal defendant. Why are you telling me this? I asked Thomas. Why not just let the police handle it? Thomas looked at me with something that might have been respect. Because you deserve to know before he wakes up and tries to spin this. Because Rita and Marcus have been carrying this weight for months, and they needed to tell someone. And because, Mrs. Hayes, I've been in this business for 32 years, and I've seen men like Derek before. They don't just wake up and become honest. They wake up and start calculating their next move. He pulled out one more sheet of paper, this one blank except for his name and phone number written in neat handwriting. When he wakes up, he's going to cry. He's going to apologize. He's going to blame the stress, the pressure, maybe even you for not seeing the signs. He's going to promise he can fix this, that he'll pay it all back, that it was just a mistake. Thomas pressed the paper into my hand. Don't believe him. Call me instead. Because the three of us, we've been documenting everything. And we're willing to help you in ways you don't even know you need yet. Why would you help me? I asked. You barely know me. Rita answered, her voice steadier now. Because he made me complicit in destroying your life. Every lie I told, every cover story I created, I knew there was a wife at home who believed in him. You don't deserve this. And maybe helping you is how I start making it right. Marcus nodded. Plus, the company's going to try to keep this quiet. They'll offer Derek a deal, let him resign quietly if he doesn't fight the restitution. That protects their reputation but leaves you with nothing. We think you should know everything before you make any decisions about your marriage or your future. Thomas gestured to the folder. Take this. Read through it when you're ready. There's documentation of the affair, the financial crimes, and some other information about company policies and employee rights that might be useful. We've made copies of everything. I took the folder with numb fingers. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. One more thing, Thomas said as the three of them moved toward the door. Derek's good at his job. I mean, really good. He's charming, persuasive, and he knows how to read people. That's probably why he was able to fool the company auditors for so long. It's definitely why he fooled you. He paused with his hand on the door handle. But here's what you should remember. A man who would steal from his employer, cheat on his wife, and manipulate his assistant into being an accomplice, that man will absolutely try to manipulate you when he wakes up. So I'm going to ask you again. When Derek wakes up and tries to rewrite this story, are you going to be ready for the truth? I looked down at the folder in my lap, then at Derek's still form on the bed. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. The heart that had stopped beating, that had been shocked back to life, that belonged to a stranger wearing my husband's face. Yes, I said quietly. I'll be ready. They filed out, leaving me alone again with Derek and the evidence of his betrayal. I didn't open the folder right away. Instead, I sat there in the growing darkness as evening settled over Portland, watching the lights of the city flicker to life through the hospital window. Somewhere out there was Vanessa Morgan, probably waiting for news about her boyfriend's heart attack. Somewhere out there was the loft Derek had rented with stolen money, filled with a life I knew nothing about. And here, in this sterile room, was the wreckage of the life I thought I'd been living. When I finally opened the folder and began to read, the sun had fully set and the only light came from the machines monitoring Derek's vital signs. The first document was a printed email exchange between Derek and Vanessa, dated 6 months ago. It started with work discussions and quickly devolved into something intimate and explicit. I forced myself to read every word, each one like a small cut. The next documents were worse. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, charges for jewelry I'd never seen. All dated on nights when Derek had told me he was working late or traveling for business. There was a particularly damning credit card statement showing a purchase at a maternity boutique. My hand started shaking so badly I had to set the papers down. Vanessa was pregnant. Or had been. Or maybe still was. The date on the receipt was 3 months ago. I thought I might vomit. Instead, I kept reading. The financial documents Marcus had compiled were extensive and damning. Derek hadn't just stolen money, he'd created an elaborate shell game of fake vendors, inflated invoices, and redirected payments. He'd used his position as senior project manager to authorize his own theft, and he'd been smart about it, spreading the amounts thin enough that no single discrepancy would trigger an audit flag. Until they all added up. Until someone looked at the bigger picture and saw the pattern. The last section of the folder contained something I hadn't expected. A timeline that Rita had created, documenting every lie she'd been forced to tell on Derek's behalf, with dates and details. She'd kept this record, she explained in a brief note, because she'd known it would eventually come out and she wanted proof that she'd been coerced. Looking at her meticulous documentation, I realized something that Thomas had been trying to tell me. These 3 people hadn't just come to deliver bad news. They'd come to offer me ammunition. They'd given me everything I would need to protect myself when Derek woke up and tried to make this my fault, our fault, anything but his fault alone. The door opened again around 9 o'clock. I looked up, expecting a nurse, but found Dr. Harper instead. Mrs. Hayes, you should go home and get some rest. Derek won't wake until morning at the earliest, possibly longer. You'll need your strength for what comes next. I almost laughed at that. Strength for what comes next. As if strength was something I could summon on demand, as if the man I'd spent 6 years building a life with hadn't just been revealed as a complete fiction. I should be here when he wakes up, I said automatically. Why? Dr. Harper's question was gentle but pointed. Forgive me for overstepping, Mrs. Hayes, but I couldn't help overhearing some of what your visitors told you earlier. And in my experience, sometimes the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is take a moment to breathe before facing the storm. I looked at him, this stranger who'd seen countless families in crisis, and something in his kind eyes made me crack. Tears came suddenly and violently, all the shock and hurt and betrayal of the past few hours pouring out in gasping sobs. Dr. Harper handed me a box of tissues and waited patiently while I fell apart. When I could finally speak again, my voice was raw. I don't know who he is. The man in that bed, I thought I knew him. I thought we were building something together. How could I have been so blind? You weren't blind, Dr. Harper said. You trusted. That's different. And trust isn't a weakness, even when it's betrayed. I wanted to believe him, but sitting there surrounded by evidence of Derek's elaborate deception, trust felt like the most naive thing in the world. I drove home in a daze, the folder on the passenger seat like a malevolent presence. Our house looked the same as I'd left it that afternoon. The porch light was on, triggered by its automatic timer. The garden gnome Derek had bought as a joke still sat by the front door. Everything looked normal, unchanged, as if the world hadn't just tilted on its axis. Inside, I walked through rooms that suddenly felt unfamiliar. The kitchen where Derek had made his protein shake that morning. The living room where we'd watched movies on Friday nights. The bedroom where we'd slept side by side, where I'd had no idea that the man next to me was living an entirely separate life. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I read through the folder again, this time making notes, highlighting details, trying to piece together the timeline of Derek's betrayal. When had it started? Had there been signs I'd missed? I thought back over the past year, searching my memory for clues. There were some, I realized with sick certainty. The way he'd become protective of his phone, taking it everywhere, even to the bathroom. The increase in evening meetings and weekend work sessions. The new cologne he'd started wearing 6 months ago, something expensive that I'd complimented him on, not knowing it was for someone else's benefit. But there had been good times too, hadn't there? Birthday dinners and anniversary celebrations. Quiet Sunday mornings and late-night conversations. Had all of that been a lie? Or had Derek somehow compartmentalized his life so thoroughly that he could be a loving husband to me while being someone else entirely to Vanessa? The question that haunted me most was how much Vanessa knew about me. Did she know Derek was married? The text messages suggested she did. There were references to "your wife," said with what seemed like casual dismissal, as if I were just an inconvenient detail in their grand romance. Around 3 a.m, I found myself looking at our wedding photos, stored in an album on the bookshelf. Derek in his gray suit, me in my simple white dress, both of us laughing by the waterfall. We'd written our own vows. Derek had promised to be honest, faithful, and true. He'd looked me in the eyes and said those words while everyone we loved watched. Had he meant them at the time? Or was even that a performance, the first act in a long con that would eventually destroy everything we'd built? I couldn't reconcile the man in those photos with the man in the hospital bed, the man whose crimes were documented in the manila folder now spread across our dining room table. They seemed like two different people. Maybe they were. Maybe I'd married a ghost and the real Derek Hayes was someone I'd never actually met. My phone buzzed at 6 a.m. I dozed off on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, the wedding album open across my lap. The screen showed a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Thomas Brennan. Just wanted to check in and let you know Derek is awake and asking for you. The police are waiting to question him. You might want to get here before that happens. Also, I suggest you call a lawyer. You're going to need one." I stared at the message for a long moment. Derek was awake. The confrontation I'd been dreading was about to begin. But Thomas was right. I needed legal protection. Whatever came next, I couldn't face it alone and unprepared. I called Bethany Reed, my best friend since college, who picked up on the second ring despite the early hour. "Lauren? What's wrong?" Everything. Everything was wrong. But I forced myself to focus on the immediate need. "Beth, I need a lawyer. A good one. Do you still have that friend who practices family law?" "James Cordell, yeah." "Lauren, what's going on?" "Derek had a heart attack yesterday," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "But that's not why I need a lawyer. Can you call your friend and ask if he can meet me today? I'll explain everything then." To her credit, Bethany didn't press for details. "I'll call him right now. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" "Not yet. But soon. I'm going to need all the help I can get." After I hung up, I stood under a scalding shower until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the feeling of contamination that clung to my skin. Derek's betrayal felt like a physical thing, something that had infected our home, our bed, our life together. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made me feel strong. Dark jeans, a crisp white blouse, my good leather jacket. If I was going to face Derek in whatever came next, I wanted to look like someone who had their life together, even if that was the furthest thing from the truth. The folder went into my bag along with my fully charged phone. Evidence and communication, the tools I would need for whatever battle was about to begin. The drive back to St. Catharines felt different in the morning light. Yesterday I'd been a terrified wife rushing to her husband's side. Today I was something else entirely. A woman who'd spent the night learning the truth about her marriage and preparing for war. When I reached the 7th floor, I found Thomas waiting outside Derek's room. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much either. "The police are inside with him now," Thomas said. "They've read him his rights. He's demanded a lawyer before he says anything." "Smart," I said bitterly. "Lauren," Thomas said, and hearing him use my first name felt oddly intimate, like we'd become allies in something neither of us had chosen. "Before you go in there, I want you to know something. Rita, Marcus, and we've all given statements to the police. We've also prepared a full report for the company. Derek's going to be fired, and he's going to face criminal charges. Nothing can change that now. But what happens to you, that's still up in the air." "What do you mean?" "I mean the company is going to want to make this go away quietly. They'll offer restitution plans, settlement agreements, non-disclosure deals. Some of those deals might include you, might offer you financial compensation in exchange for your silence." He looked at me intently. "Don't sign anything without a lawyer reviewing it first. And don't let Derek convince you to protect him. He made his choices. Now you get to make yours." The door opened and 2 police officers emerged, their faces professionally neutral. One of them nodded to me. "Mrs. Hayes? Your husband is asking for you. We'll need to speak with you as well, but you can see him first." I took a breath and walked into the room. Derek was sitting up in bed, looking pale but alert. When he saw me, his face crumpled with what looked like genuine anguish. "Lauren," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thank God you're here. I know you must have heard things. I know you're confused and scared. But please, let me explain. Let me tell you my side before you believe what they're saying about me." I stood at the foot of his bed, the manila folder in my bag feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. This was the moment Thomas had warned me about. The moment when Derek would try to rewrite reality, to make himself the victim, to manipulate me one more time. I looked at my husband, at this man whose heart had stopped and been shocked back to life, and I realized something Thomas had been trying to tell me all along. Sometimes the cruelest thing we can do is survive. Derek was alive. He would recover from his heart attack. And he would have to face every consequence of the life he'd built on lies. "Before you explain anything," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded, "I need to ask you one question. And Derek, I need you to understand that I already know the answer. This is just to see if you're capable of telling the truth." He nodded eagerly, like a drowning man reaching for a lifeline. "Anything. Ask me anything. Is Vanessa Morgan pregnant with your child?" The color drained from his face. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. In that silence, I had all the confirmation I needed. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Derek calling my name behind me, his explanations dying on his lips. In the hallway, Thomas was waiting. He took one look at my face and nodded. "Ready to hear what else we know?" he asked. I thought about the question he'd asked me yesterday. "Are you ready for the truth?" I hadn't been then. Maybe I wasn't now. But ready or not, the truth was here, and I had to face it. "Tell me everything," I said. And Thomas Brennan smiled. Thomas led me to a small conference room 3 floors below the intensive care unit. The kind of windowless space hospitals use for delivering bad news to families, with neutral beige walls and chairs upholstered in a fabric designed to hide stains. Rita and Marcus were already there, along with a woman I didn't recognize. She was in her late 40s, wearing a crisp navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive. Lauren Hayes, this is Patricia Whitmore, Thomas said as I took a seat at the small round table. She's the head of human resources at Westview Technology Solutions. She wanted to meet with you personally. Patricia extended her hand across the table. Her grip was firm, professional, the kind of handshake that had probably been practiced in business school. Mrs. Hayes, first let me say how sorry I am about your husband's medical emergency. I understand this must be an incredibly difficult time for you. I didn't take her hand. You're here about the embezzlement. She withdrew her hand smoothly, not offended, and sat down across from me. I'm here to discuss several matters related to your husband's employment with Westview. The company is prepared to offer you certain considerations during this challenging period. Considerations, I repeated, tasting the corporate speak. You mean you want to make sure I don't sue you or talk to the press about how one of your senior managers stole $250,000? Patricia's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Respect, maybe, or recalculation. Mrs. Hayes, I can see you're not interested in dancing around the situation. So let me be direct. Yes, the company has concerns about liability and reputation. But we also have genuine concern for the innocent parties affected by Derek's actions. That includes you. How generous, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Thomas cleared his throat. Patricia, maybe you should explain what the company is proposing before we get into the legalities. Patricia opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder significantly thicker than the one Thomas had given me yesterday. Westview Technology Solutions is prepared to offer you a settlement package. We'll cover all of Derek's medical expenses related to his cardiac event. We'll also provide a cash payment of $50,000 as compensation for the disruption to your life. In exchange, you would sign a non-disclosure agreement and agree not to pursue any legal action against the company. $50,000. It sounded like a lot of money until you considered what it was buying. My silence. My complicity in their cover-up. My agreement to pretend that Derek's crimes were a private matter rather than a failure of corporate oversight. What about Derek? I asked. What happens to him? Derek will be terminated immediately. He'll be required to repay the full amount of the embezzled funds through a structured payment plan. If he fails to comply, we'll pursue criminal charges. If he does comply and stays quiet about the internal details of how this occurred, we'll allow him to resign rather than be fired. It protects his future employment prospects. I looked at Thomas, who was watching me carefully. You knew about this offer. That's why you told me to get a lawyer. I knew the company would try something like this, he confirmed. They did the same thing 3 years ago when a different manager was caught padding expense reports. Paid off his wife, made the whole thing disappear. The manager moved to another city and the wife bought her silence with the settlement money. That wife didn't have what you have, though, Marcus added quietly. He pushed a flash drive across the table toward me. Everything. Every transaction, every email, every piece of evidence we've collected. It's all on there. The company doesn't know we made copies. Patricia's professional composure cracked slightly. Mr. Chen, that information is company property. Sharing it with unauthorized parties is a violation of your employment contract. So fire me, Marcus said calmly. I've already updated my resume. But Mrs. Hayes deserves to know the full extent of what her husband did and how long the company ignored the warning signs. Warning signs? I leaned forward. You knew something was wrong before yesterday? Rita spoke up, her voice still raw from crying but stronger than it had been in Derek's hospital room. I flagged unusual expense reports 8 months ago. Hotel charges that didn't match Derek's calendar, restaurant bills from places that weren't near any client sites. I sent it to my supervisor, who sent it to Patricia's department. Patricia's jaw tightened. Those concerns were investigated and found to be within normal business parameters. Senior managers have discretionary budgets for client entertainment. Client entertainment at a maternity boutique? Rita's voice rose. I flagged that too. Along with jewelry purchases and spa packages. None of it made sense for business expenses, but I was told to mind my own business and do my job. The pieces were falling into place. The company hadn't just failed to catch Derek's theft. They'd actively ignored evidence because investigating a senior manager would be messy and complicated. It was easier to look the other way until the problem became too big to hide. "How long have you known about Vanessa Morgan?" I asked Patricia directly. She hesitated, and in that pause, I had my answer. "The affair started at a company retreat last March," Thomas said when Patricia remained silent. "Half the office knew about it within a month. It wasn't exactly subtle. They were eating lunch together every day, leaving the building at the same time, finding excuses to work on joint projects. And nobody thought to tell his wife?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "It's not company policy to involve ourselves in employees' personal relationships," Patricia said carefully. "As long as it doesn't affect work performance or create a hostile work environment." "But stealing money does affect work performance," I countered. "And you just admitted that Rita flagged suspicious expenses 8 months ago. So at what point does the personal become the company's problem?" Patricia closed her briefcase with a decisive click. "Mrs. Hayes, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But the offer stands. $50,000, medical expenses covered, and you walk away from this without being dragged through a lengthy legal process. Or you can reject it, hire lawyers who will cost you a significant portion of any eventual settlement, and spend the next 2 years of your life reliving your husband's betrayal in depositions and court hearings." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Think about it. You have until Monday to decide. After that, the offer is withdrawn and you'll be on your own." After Patricia left, the 4 of us sat in silence for a long moment. I could feel Thomas, Rita, and Marcus watching me, waiting to see how I'd react. "She's not wrong about the lawyers," I finally said. "Fighting a corporation with resources and legal teams would be expensive and exhausting. But you'd win," Marcus said with certainty. "I've gone through the books thoroughly. The company's negligence is documented. Rita's complaints were in writing. They knew something was wrong and they did nothing. That's not just a Derek problem. That's a systemic problem." Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying me. "The question isn't whether you'd win eventually. The question is what you want to accomplish. Do you want money? Do you want justice? Do you want to burn it all down and make sure everyone knows what happened?" I thought about Derek lying in that hospital bed, calling my name as I walked out. I thought about Vanessa Morgan, pregnant with my husband's child, waiting somewhere for news about her lover's recovery. I thought about Patricia Whitmore and her corporate calculations, trying to buy my silence for the price of a used car. I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, to make sure that when this is over, Derek doesn't get to pretend he's the victim. I want Vanessa to understand that she didn't win some romantic prize. And I want the company to face consequences for looking the other way while their manager destroyed lives." Rita smiled for the first time since I'd met her. "Then you're going to need more than just evidence. You're going to need a strategy." Over the next 2 hours, I learned more about corporate malfeasance than I'd ever wanted to know. Marcus walked me through the financial documents on the flash drive, showing me how Derek had created fake vendors, submitted false invoices, and routed payments to accounts he controlled. The amounts were small enough individually to avoid triggering automatic audits, but over 18 months, they added up to devastating theft. "The thing is," Marcus explained, pulling up a spreadsheet on his laptop, "Derek wasn't the only one benefiting from lax oversight. Look at these other managers' expense reports. None of them are stealing on Derek's scale, but there's a pattern of inflated charges, questionable purchases, and minimal documentation. The company has been tolerating financial sloppiness across multiple departments." "Why would they do that?" I asked. "Because enforcing strict controls is expensive and time-consuming," Thomas said. "It's easier to give managers autonomy and hope they don't abuse it." Westview grew fast over the past 5 years. They went from a 50-person startup to a 300-employee company. The infrastructure never caught up with the growth. Rita pulled out her own documentation, the timeline she'd been keeping of Derek's lies and her forced complicity. He was good at making me feel like I was the problem. Every time I questioned an expense or a scheduling conflict, he'd get defensive. He'd say I was being paranoid, that I didn't understand the demands of senior management. He made me doubt myself. I knew that feeling. How many times had Derek done the same thing to me? When I questioned why he was working so late, why his phone was always face down on the table, why he suddenly needed a separate credit card for business expenses. He'd made me feel like I was being a suspicious, nagging wife instead of a woman noticing obvious red flags. So here's what I'm thinking, Thomas said, pulling out a notepad and starting to sketch out a plan. The company wants to contain this quietly. They're betting that you'll take their settlement because fighting seems too hard. But what if instead of fighting them in court, you fight them in the court of public opinion? You mean go to the press? The idea made my stomach clench. The thought of my private humiliation becoming public knowledge was horrifying. Not exactly. I mean, you document everything, you build an airtight case, and then you go back to Patricia with a counteroffer. You'll sign their NDA and take their settlement, but the price just went up significantly. And the terms include accountability measures that ensure this doesn't happen to someone else. Marcus nodded, catching on to Thomas's strategy. You're talking about forcing them to implement real oversight. Mandatory audits, whistleblower protections, transparent expense reporting. Exactly. You turn your settlement into a catalyst for actual change. Derek faces criminal charges, not just quiet termination. The company reforms its policies. And you walk away with enough money to rebuild your life. It was clever. More than clever. It was a way to transform my victimhood into something productive, to ensure that Rita's complaints wouldn't be ignored the next time, to make Derek's betrayal mean something beyond just my personal pain. How much money are we talking about? I asked. Thomas looked at Marcus, who pulled up another spreadsheet. Based on the company's revenue, their liability exposure, and the strength of the evidence, I'd say you could reasonably demand somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000. Maybe more if you wanted to push it. $500,000. The number was staggering. It was enough to pay off our mortgage, cover Derek's medical bills without the company's help, and have enough left over to start fresh somewhere else if I wanted to. There's something else you should know, Rita said quietly. She pulled out a printed email and slid it across the table. This is from Vanessa to Derek, dated 2 weeks ago. I didn't want to read it. I'd already seen enough of their intimate exchanges to last a lifetime. But something in Rita's expression told me this was important. The email was short and devastating. Vanessa was 12 weeks pregnant. She wanted Derek to leave me. She was tired of being the secret, tired of the sneaking around. She'd given him an ultimatum. Tell his wife by Thanksgiving or she would do it herself. Thanksgiving is next week, I said numbly. Derek knew he was running out of time, Thomas explained. My guess is the stress of maintaining both lives while facing Vanessa's deadline contributed to his heart attack. Add in the audit starting and the confrontation with us, and his body just couldn't take it. So Derek's heart attack wasn't just bad luck or genetics. It was the physical manifestation of the lies catching up with him. There was something almost poetic about that, in a dark way. His body had betrayed him the way he'd betrayed everyone else. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number appeared on the screen. This is Vanessa. I heard what happened to Derek. I need to talk to you. Please. I showed the message to the others. Rita's expression hardened. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Are you going to respond? He asked. I don't know. What could she possibly have to say to me? Maybe she wants to apologize, Rita suggested, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it. More likely she wants to know if Derek told you about the baby, Marcus said. Or she wants to position herself as the grieving girlfriend who deserves sympathy. Thomas took my phone and read the message again. Or this could be an opportunity. You want to make sure Vanessa understands she didn't win a prize? Talk to her. Hear what she has to say. And then decide how much truth she can handle. It was manipulative. It was calculating. It was exactly the kind of strategic thinking I'd never associated with myself. I was a photographer, an artist. I took pictures of landscapes and architecture, trying to capture beauty and light. I wasn't someone who plotted revenge or played psychological games. But maybe that's who I needed to become. At least for now. At least until I'd secured my future and made sure Derek faced real consequences for his choices. Set up a meeting, I told Thomas. Somewhere public. A coffee shop or restaurant. I'll talk to her. Rita looked concerned. Are you sure? You don't owe her anything. I'm not doing it for her. I'm doing it for me. I need to see her, to understand what Derek saw in her, to know who this person is that he thought was worth destroying our marriage for. Thomas nodded approvingly. I'll come with you. Not inside, but nearby. Just in case things get uncomfortable. I'll come too, Rita said. I want to give her a piece of my mind for making me lie for her. Let's not make it a confrontation, I cautioned. If we want information from her, we need her to feel comfortable enough to talk. That means I need to seem sympathetic, or at least not openly hostile. Marcus looked impressed. You're thinking like a strategist now. I'm thinking like a survivor, I corrected. There's a difference. We spent another hour planning. Thomas would text Vanessa back from my phone, proposing a meeting at a coffee shop in the Pearl District the next morning. Rita would compile additional documentation about Derek's manipulation of both of us. Marcus would prepare a detailed financial breakdown that I could use in negotiations with Patricia. As we were wrapping up, Thomas pulled me aside. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Are you doing this for justice, or for revenge? I considered the question carefully. Does it matter? It might. Justice is about making things right, ensuring accountability, preventing future harm. Revenge is about making someone hurt the way they hurt you. Both are understandable motivations, but they lead to different outcomes. I don't want to hurt Derek, I said slowly, surprising myself with the truth of it. I mean, part of me does. Part of me wants him to suffer the way I'm suffering right now. But mostly I just want him to face the reality of what he's done. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more talking his way out of consequences. And Vanessa? Vanessa made choices too. She knew Derek was married. She pursued him anyway. She got pregnant and then demanded he leave me. She's not an innocent bystander. They rewrite the story so they're always the victim. I know. I just wish it didn't hurt so much to accept that. We stopped walking and stood at the edge of the path, looking out over the water. A pair of ducks glided past, leaving ripples in their wake. I thought about my childhood. About all the small moments that had added up to this. The birthday parties where I was an afterthought. The school events she missed. The achievements she dismissed. The constant feeling that I was auditioning for a role I'd never quite land. I was 7 the first time I realized I was different from Melanie. We were at my grandmother's house for Easter. My mother had dressed us both in matching pink dresses with white lace collars. I hated mine. The lace itched and the waistband was too tight. I asked if I could change and my mother told me not to be difficult. Melanie's dress fit perfectly. She twirled and laughed and my grandmother clapped and called her a little princess. I stood off to the side, tugging at my collar, trying not to cry. Later, during the egg hunt, I found a golden egg tucked behind the garden shed. My grandmother had said whoever found it would get a special prize. I ran inside, breathless and excited, holding it up. I found it, I shouted. I found the golden egg. My mother looked up from where she was sitting with my aunts. That's nice, sweetie. But I think Melanie should have it. She didn't find as many eggs as you. But I found the golden one, I said, confused. I know. And that's wonderful. But it's important to share. To be generous. Melanie needs this more than you do. I handed over the egg. Melanie squealed with delight and hugged it to her chest. My grandmother gave her a chocolate bunny the size of my head. Everyone clapped. I stood there with my empty basket, itchy dress, and the slow creeping realization that I was supposed to make myself smaller so Melanie could feel bigger. That was the first time. But it wasn't the last. When I was 12, I won a regional science fair. My project on water filtration systems had taken me 3 months to complete. I'd spent weekends at the library, researching and designing and testing. When they announced my name as the winner, I felt a burst of pride so bright it made me dizzy. I ran to tell my mother. She was waiting in the parking lot with Melanie, who had spent the afternoon at dance practice. "Mom, I won," I said breathlessly. "First place." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's great, honey. Did you thank the judges?" "I did. And I said your name when they asked who helped me." "You didn't need to do that," she said, starting the car. "I barely helped. This was all you." On the drive home, Melanie talked about her dance recital coming up next month. My mother asked detailed questions about the choreography, the costumes, the music. I sat in the back seat with my blue ribbon and my project board, staring out the window, wondering why winning didn't feel like I thought it would. That night at dinner, my father asked me about the fair. I told him about the judges' questions, the other projects, the moment they called my name. He listened, nodding, asking follow-up questions. Then my mother interrupted. "Speaking of next month," she said brightly, "we need to make sure everyone can come to Melanie's recital. It's going to be a big deal. She's doing a solo." My father turned his attention to Melanie. "A solo? That's wonderful, sweetheart." Melanie beamed. "I'm really nervous, but Miss Carmen says I'm ready." "You'll be amazing," my mother said warmly. "We should invite your grandparents. And maybe Aunt Lorraine. I can make a dinner reservation after the show. Somewhere nice. To celebrate." "What about my science fair award ceremony?" I asked quietly. "It's the same weekend." My mother waved a hand dismissively. "That's just a small reception, isn't it? Not the same as a performance. Melanie's worked so hard for this. We need to be there for her." "But I worked hard too." "I know you did, sweetie. And we're very proud. But dance recitals only happen once. You'll have other science fairs." I didn't. I had one regional win in my entire childhood, and no one came to the award ceremony. My grandmother sent a card. My father called from a work trip to congratulate me. My mother and Melanie went to the recital, took 100 photos, and posted them all over social media with captions about dedication and talent and family pride. I learned to stop expecting things after that. Stopped hoping she'd show up. Stopped telling her about achievements. Stopped asking for her time or attention. I got good at being invisible. At taking up less space. At convincing myself I didn't need her validation because needing it hurt too much when it never came. But the truth was, I did need it. I needed it desperately. And some part of me kept hoping that one day, she'd see me. Really see me. Not as a supporting character in Melanie's story, but as my own person with my own worth. The wedding was supposed to be different. I'd let myself believe that maybe, finally, this would be the moment she'd step up. That she'd put aside her need for control and just be happy for me. That she'd let me have this one thing without making it about her. But of course she didn't. Because people don't change just because you want them to. They change when they decide to. And my mother had decided long ago that her way was the only way, and my feelings were negotiable. Daniel's voice pulled me back to the present. "Where'd you go?" I blinked, realizing I'd been staring at the water without seeing it. Just thinking about how long I'd been doing this. Doing what? Making myself smaller so she could feel bigger. He pulled me closer, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "You don't have to do that anymore." "I know. But it's hard to unlearn. It's hard to believe I deserve to take up space." "You do," he said firmly. "You deserve to be seen." To be heard. To be celebrated. Not erased. We stayed by the river until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. On the drive back to my apartment, I felt a strange kind of calm settling over me. Not peace exactly. More like acceptance. My mother wasn't coming to the wedding. She wasn't going to apologize. She wasn't going to magically transform into the parent I needed. And that was okay. It hurt, but it was okay. Because I was still getting married. I was still surrounded by people who loved me. And I was finally choosing myself. That night, I called Aunt Lorraine. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. Nessa, sweetheart. I was hoping you'd call. You heard? Your mother called me 3 times today. She's quite upset. I figured. Lorraine was quiet for a moment. Do you want to tell me what happened? I told her everything. The florist. The confrontation. The text. I paused. But she's also not the real villain here. Derek is. He made vows to me. He stole from his company. He manipulated Rita. Whatever Vanessa did, it was with Derek's encouragement and participation. Thomas smiled. That's the perspective you need to keep. Don't let anger make you lose sight of who's really responsible here. Before I left the hospital, I made myself go back up to Derek's room. Not to see him, but to see Dr. Harper. I found him making rounds, checking on another cardiac patient 2 doors down from Derek's room. Mrs. Hayes, he greeted me with surprise. I didn't expect to see you back so soon. I need to ask you a medical question. Off the record, just between us. He gestured to a quiet corner of the hallway. Of course. Derek's heart attack, how serious was it really? I got the clinical explanation yesterday, but I need to understand the long-term implications. Dr. Harper's expression became thoughtful. Your husband suffered significant cardiac damage. The stents we placed will help, but he'll need to make major lifestyle changes. Stress management, diet, exercise, medication compliance. Without those changes, he's at high risk for another event within the next few years. And with those changes, he could live a normal lifespan. But it requires commitment and honesty with his medical team about all factors affecting his health. He paused meaningfully. Including stress from personal circumstances. So the stress of maintaining a double life, facing criminal charges, losing his job, all of that could literally kill him? I wouldn't put it quite that dramatically, but yes. Significant ongoing stress is contraindicated for cardiac recovery. Your husband needs to simplify his life, reduce complications, and focus on healing. The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek had created such an elaborate web of lies that the truth might actually be medically dangerous. But that wasn't my problem to solve. He'd made his choices. Now he'd have to live with the consequences, literally. Thank you, doctor, I said. That's what I needed to know. I drove home as the afternoon sun began to set over Portland, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. My phone rang as I pulled into our driveway. Bethany. Lauren, I talked to James Cordell. He can meet you tomorrow at 2. He's cleared his schedule because I told him it was urgent. Thank you, Beth. I don't know what I'd do without you right now. Are you ready to tell me what's going on? Because I've been going crazy with worry all day. I looked at our house, at the life Derek and I had built together, knowing it was all about to come crashing down. Come over. Bring wine. This is going to take a while. Bethany arrived 30 minutes later with 2 bottles of expensive red wine and a look of fierce determination. We settled at the kitchen table, and I pulled out the folders. Thomas's evidence. Marcus's financial analysis. Rita's timeline. The emails, the photos, the bank statements. I told her everything. The heart attack, the hospital revelation, the affair with Vanessa, the embezzlement, the pregnancy. I watched Bethany's expressions shift from concern to shock to anger to disbelief and back to anger again. When I finished, she poured us both generous glasses of wine and downed half of hers in one gulp. "That absolute bastard," she finally said. "I never liked him, you know. I know I never said anything because you seemed happy, but there was always something about Derek that felt off. Too smooth. Too perfect. Like he was performing instead of just being. Why didn't you say something? Would you have believed me? When you're in love, you don't want to hear that your friends have doubts. You'd have just thought I was being overprotective or jealous." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm so sorry, Lauren. I'm sorry this happened to you, and I'm sorry I wasn't more vocal about my concerns. You couldn't have known it was this bad. Nobody could have. Except apparently half of Derek's office." We spent the next 2 hours going through everything again, with Bethany asking questions and helping me organize my thoughts. She had a practical mind, honed by years as a project manager at an architecture firm, and she approached the situation like she would any complex problem. "Okay, so here's what I'm seeing," she said, creating a list on a notepad. "You need to secure your finances immediately. Tomorrow morning, first thing, you go to the bank and separate your accounts. Open new ones in just your name and transfer half of everything. Don't leave him access to wipe you out." "Is that legal?" "It's marital property. Until there's a divorce decree, you have as much right to it as he does. And given that he already stole your savings once, you need to protect what's left." She was right. I hadn't even thought about the bank accounts. Derek had always handled our finances. I'd trusted him with that responsibility, just like I'd trusted him with everything else. "Next, you document everything yourself. I know Thomas and the others have given you evidence, but you need your own paper trail. Every conversation with Derek, every meeting with the company, every interaction with Vanessa. Write it all down with dates and times. If this goes to court, you want your own contemporaneous notes. Third, you think carefully about what you want the end result to be. Do you want to stay married and try to work through this? Do you want a divorce? Do you want Derek in jail or just paying restitution? Because the decisions you make in the next few days will determine which of those outcomes is possible." I looked at the wedding photo still sitting on the bookshelf from my sleepless night of examination. Derek and me by the waterfall, smiling like we had our whole lives ahead of us. In a way, we had. Just not the life we'd imagined. "I want a divorce," I said clearly. "I want Derek to face criminal charges. I want the company to pay for their negligence. And I want to walk away with enough money that I never have to depend on anyone again." Bethany raised her glass. "Then let's make sure that's exactly what happens." We talked until almost midnight, planning strategy and discussing contingencies. Bethany would come with me to meet James Cordell. She'd also reach out to a divorce attorney she knew, someone aggressive who specialized in high-conflict separations. We made a list of everything in the house that was solely mine, everything I needed to protect or document. After Bethany left, I walked through our home one more time, seeing it with new eyes. This had been our space, our sanctuary, but Derek had polluted it with his lies. Every room held memories that were now tainted. The kitchen where we'd cooked together. The living room where we'd celebrated anniversaries. The bedroom where I'd slept beside a stranger wearing my husband's face. I couldn't stay here. Not long term. This house was part of the old life, the life built on deception. Whatever came next, wherever I ended up, it needed to be a space that was entirely mine, unsullied by Derek's betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Vanessa agreed to meet tomorrow at 10. Catalyst Coffee on Northwest 23rd. We'll be nearby. Tomorrow I would look into the eyes of the woman my husband had chosen over me. The woman carrying his child. The woman who'd helped destroy my marriage without ever meeting me. I should have been nervous or angry or afraid. Instead, I felt a strange calm settling over me. The shock was wearing off, replaced by clarity. Derek had made his choices. Vanessa had made hers. The company had made theirs. Now it was my turn to choose. And unlike them, I was going to choose with full knowledge of the consequences, with clear eyes and honest intentions. I pulled out my laptop and started typing. A detailed account of everything that had happened since the phone call about Derek's heart attack. Every conversation, every revelation, every piece of evidence. Bethany was right about documentation. If this was going to become a legal battle, I needed my own record of events. As I wrote, I realized something surprising. I wasn't writing this just for legal protection. I was writing it to process what had happened, to transform the chaos of emotions into a coherent narrative. Maybe this was how I'd survive this, by treating it like a story I was documenting, maintaining the emotional distance of an observer rather than drowning in the pain of being the protagonist. Around 2 a.m, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not the shocked tears from the hospital or the bitter tears while reading the evidence. These were different. These were mourning tears, grieving for the marriage I'd thought I had, the future I'd believed in, the man I'd loved who had never really existed. I cried until I was empty, until there was nothing left but a hollow exhaustion. Then I washed my face, climbed into bed still wearing my clothes, and fell into a dreamless sleep. The alarm went off at 7. Time to face Vanessa Morgan and find out what she had to say for herself. Catalyst Coffee occupied a corner storefront in one of Portland's trendier neighborhoods, the kind of place that served pour-over coffee in ceramic mugs and displayed local artwork on exposed brick walls. I arrived 15 minutes early, wanting to claim the strategic advantage of choosing where to sit. I selected a table near the back window, positioned so I could see the entrance but with enough privacy that our conversation wouldn't be overheard by the handful of other morning customers. Thomas was already there, seated at the counter with a newspaper, looking like any other middle-aged businessman grabbing coffee before work. Rita had texted that she was parked across the street, watching through her car window. The knowledge that I had backup nearby helped steady my nerves. Vanessa Morgan walked in at exactly 10 o'clock. I recognized her immediately from the social media photos I'd obsessively studied, though seeing her in person was different. She was younger than me by at least 5 years, petite with long blonde hair pulled into a loose braid. She wore yoga pants and an oversized cardigan that didn't quite conceal the small bump of early pregnancy. Her face was pale, free of makeup, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She spotted me and hesitated, her hand going protectively to her stomach. For a moment I thought she might bolt. Then she squared her shoulders and walked toward my table. "Lauren?" Her voice was softer than I'd expected, almost timid. "Vanessa. Sit down." She slid into the chair across from me, keeping her hands folded in her lap, not meeting my eyes. An awkward silence stretched between us. She'd asked for this meeting, but now that we were face to face, she seemed unable to find words. "Coffee?" I offered, my tone neutral. "Just water, please. I can't have caffeine." She touched her stomach again, a gesture that was becoming familiar. "Because of the baby." I signaled the barista and ordered water for Vanessa and a refill of my own coffee. The simple transaction bought us a few more minutes before we had to actually speak to each other. When the drinks arrived, Vanessa wrapped both hands around her water glass like she needed something to hold on to. "Thank you for meeting me," she finally said. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. But I'm curious what you could possibly have to say that would matter now." She flinched at my tone but didn't argue with it. "I heard about Derek's heart attack. Is he going to be okay?" "He'll survive. Whether he'll be okay depends on your definition of the word." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted him to get hurt. But you did want him to leave his wife. You gave him an ultimatum. Tell me by Thanksgiving or you'd do it yourself." Her face went white. "How did you know about that?" Derek's assistant kept copies of everything. Every email, every text message, every lie he asked her to tell on your behalf. "Did you think this was all going to stay secret forever? I thought once you knew, once everything was out in the open, we could all just move forward." Vanessa's voice broke. "I thought Derek would finally be free to be with me and our baby. I thought you'd be angry but eventually understand that sometimes people fall in love and marriages end. The naivety in her words was almost stunning. She actually believed she was the heroine of some romantic story, the woman who'd saved Derek from a loveless marriage. She had no idea she was just another victim of his manipulation. Tell me something, Vanessa. When did Derek tell you his marriage was unhappy? She looked confused by the question. What do you mean? I mean, what lies did he feed you about me? Was I cold? Distant? Did we sleep in separate rooms? Was I holding him back from his dreams? Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. He said you'd grown apart. That you wanted different things. That he tried to make it work but you were more interested in your photography than in your marriage. I laughed, a bitter sound that made other customers glance our way. My photography. The hobby I pursue 2 afternoons a week while Derek supposedly worked late. The hobby that brings in maybe $5,000 a year compared to his 6-figure salary. That's what destroyed our marriage. He said you were distant. That you didn't understand the pressure he was under at work. Did he tell you he was stealing from the company? That he'd embezzled over $200,000 to fund his lifestyle with you? The color drained completely from Vanessa's face. That's not true. Derek would never do that. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of Marcus's financial documents. Here. Transaction records. Fake vendor accounts. Redirected payments. All traced back to Derek over the past 18 months. Vanessa stared at the screen, her hands trembling. I don't understand. He told me he got a huge bonus. He said his investments were paying off. He lied. About the money, about our marriage, about probably everything else he told you. I leaned forward. Vanessa, I need you to understand something. You're not special. You're not the love of his life who rescued him from unhappiness. You're a convenience who happened to be available when Derek decided he wanted the excitement of an affair. Tears were streaming down her face now. That's not true. He loves me. He wants this baby. Does he? Because when I asked him about your pregnancy yesterday, he couldn't even form words to answer. He just stared at me like a trapped animal. You asked him about the baby? Her voice rose, drawing more attention from nearby tables. You had no right to do that. He deserved to tell you in his own time, in his own way. He had 8 months to tell me. He chose not to. Just like he chose to steal money, manipulate his assistant, and build an entire secret life while pretending to be a devoted husband. I kept my voice level, refusing to match her emotional intensity. You wanted to talk to me, Vanessa. So let's talk honestly. Did Derek ever actually promise to leave me? She wiped at her tears with the sleeve of her cardigan. Yes. He said after the holidays, he'd tell you everything. He wanted to wait until after Thanksgiving so he wouldn't ruin your family time together. How considerate of him. And did it occur to you to question why a man who supposedly loved you and wanted to be with you kept finding reasons to delay? He said you'd been through a lot. That your father died last year and you were still grieving. He didn't want to add to your pain. That detail was true. My father had passed away 11 months ago, and it had been devastating. But the idea that Derek had used my grief as an excuse to delay his confession was sickening. He'd held me while I cried about my father's death, all the while planning his exit strategy with another woman. Let me tell you what Derek was actually doing, I said. He was buying time. Time to steal more money, time to figure out how to hide his tracks, time to prepare for the financial burden of supporting 2 households and a baby. He was never going to tell me willingly. Your ultimatum forced his hand, and the stress of it literally stopped his heart. Vanessa was sobbing openly now. I love him. I know you don't believe me, but I do. And he loves me. Maybe he does, in whatever broken way Derek is capable of loving anyone. But love doesn't justify what he did. To me, to you, to his company, to Rita who he turned into an accomplice. Derek's love is selfish and destructive. I pulled out another document, this one a printout of the email where Vanessa had pressured Derek to leave me. You sent this 2 weeks ago. You knew he was married when you started sleeping with him. You knew I existed, that I believed my marriage was solid, that Derek and I were planning our future together. And you pursued him anyway. He pursued me, Vanessa protested weakly. At the retreat, he was the one who started flirting, who suggested we have dinner together, who kissed me first. And you let him. You kissed him back. You slept with him knowing he'd go home to me afterward. You got pregnant and decided that entitled you to blow up my life. I paused, letting the words sink in. You're not innocent in this, Vanessa. You made choices too. She covered her face with her hands. What do you want from me? Why did you agree to meet if you're just going to tell me what a terrible person I am? Because I need to know something, and only you can answer it. Are you going to keep this baby? Vanessa's hands dropped, revealing a face full of confusion and hurt. Of course I am. It's Derek's child. Our child. And what's your plan? Derek is going to be fired from Westview. He's facing criminal charges for embezzlement. His salary is gone. His reputation is destroyed. Even if he avoids jail time, he'll have massive restitution payments. How exactly do you think he's going to support you and a baby? We'll figure it out. People manage with less. You're a marketing coordinator making maybe $50,000 a year. Derek's legal fees alone will eat through any savings he has left. You'll be a single mother, effectively, because he'll be too busy dealing with the consequences of his crimes to be much of a father. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You're just trying to scare me. You want me to give up on Derek so you can have him back. Well, I won't. He chose me. He chose our baby. And once he recovers, once this mess is sorted out, we're going to be together. Sit down, Vanessa. Something in my tone made her obey. She sank back into the chair, looking younger and more vulnerable than before. I don't want Derek back, I said quietly. That's what you need to understand. The man I married doesn't exist. He was a fiction Derek created, a role he played when it suited him. The real Derek is someone who lies and steals and manipulates everyone around him. I don't want that man in my life, and honestly, neither should you. But the baby deserves better than Derek as a father. And you deserve better than Derek as a partner. But those are your choices to make, not mine. I gathered my papers and stood. I came here because I needed to see you, to understand what Derek saw in you that was worth destroying everything for. And you know what I realized? It's not about you at all. Derek didn't choose you because you're special or perfect or his soulmate. He chose you because you were available and willing, and because having a secret made him feel important. Vanessa was crying again, but this time the tears seemed different. Less defensive, more defeated. The company is offering me a settlement to stay quiet about what Derek did. I'm going to take it, but I'm negotiating for enough money to start over completely. Derek will face charges regardless. His career is finished. His reputation is destroyed. And his heart is damaged in ways that mean stress could kill him in the next few years. I looked at her carefully. Is that really the future you want for yourself and your child? I don't know, she whispered. I don't know anything anymore. Then figure it out. But do it with clear eyes, knowing exactly who Derek is and what he's capable of. Don't let him manipulate you the way he manipulated me. I pulled a business card from my purse and slid it across the table. This is my lawyer. If you need help, if Derek tries to convince you to lie for him or hide assets or do anything illegal, call this number. Protect yourself and your baby, because Derek sure as hell won't. I walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Thomas fell into step beside me as I reached the sidewalk, and Rita joined us from across the street. Neither of them asked how it went. They could probably read it on my face. James Cordell's office is 3 blocks from here, Thomas said, checking his watch. You've got an hour before your appointment. Want to grab lunch first? I shook my head. I need to walk. I need to process. Rita squeezed my arm. That was brave, what you just did. Facing her like that. It wasn't bravery. It was necessity. I needed to see if she was a monster or just misguided. Turns out she's the latter. Derek's good at finding people he can use. We walked in silence for a while, moving through the Pearl District's mix of old industrial buildings and modern condos. The neighborhood had transformed itself over the past decade, shedding its warehouse past for a sleeker, wealthier identity. It felt appropriate somehow, a physical metaphor for the transformation I was attempting in my own life. She really believes he loves her, I said eventually. She's built this whole narrative where Derek is her soulmate and I'm the obstacle that kept them apart. Young women often do that, Thomas observed. They romanticize the affair, ignore the red flags, convince themselves they're special. Reality doesn't usually set in until after the man has left his wife and the excitement wears off. Do you think she'll keep the baby? That's above my pay grade to predict. But I will say this, having a child with Derek Hayes is going to be the biggest mistake of her life, whether she realizes it now or 10 years from now. Rita pulled out her phone, checking messages. The company's been calling me all morning. Patricia wants to meet with me and Marcus this afternoon. They're probably going to try to convince us to sign NDAs too. Don't sign anything without reading it carefully, I warned. And don't let them make you feel guilty for telling me the truth. You both did the right thing. I'm not signing anything, Rita said firmly. I'm done protecting Derek and done protecting a company that ignored my warnings for months. If they fire me for it, so be it. We reached the building that housed James Cordell's law office, a renovated brick building with a small brass plaque by the entrance. Thomas and Rita waited outside while I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The office was smaller than I'd expected, just a reception area and 2 private offices. But the diplomas on the wall and the organized case files visible through the open door suggested competence and experience. A woman in her 30s greeted me from the reception desk. Lauren Hayes? James is expecting you. Go right in. James Cordell was younger than I'd pictured, maybe early 40s, with dark hair going gray at the temples and sharp brown eyes behind minimalist glasses. He stood and shook my hand with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. Mrs. Hayes, please sit. Bethany Reed spoke very highly of you when she called. She said you were dealing with a complex situation involving your husband. I sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk and pulled out the folders Thomas had given me. Complex is one word for it. Devastating might be more accurate. Over the next hour, I laid out everything. The heart attack, the affair, the embezzlement, the pregnancy, the company's settlement offer. James listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. His expression remained neutral throughout, giving nothing away about what he was thinking. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to be very direct with you. What you're describing is not just a messy divorce. This is a case involving multiple areas of law, family law, criminal law, employment law, and potentially civil litigation. You need more than just a divorce attorney. You need a legal team. I can't afford a legal team. That's why I'm negotiating with the company for a better settlement. I understand, but hear me out. The company's initial offer of $50,000 plus medical expenses is insulting given the facts of this case. You have documentation of corporate negligence, evidence that they ignored warning signs, and the involvement of senior management in what amounts to organized fraud. The company's liability exposure here is enormous. He pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. Between the embezzlement, the documented negligence, the retaliation risk if they punish your informants, and the public relations nightmare if this goes public, I'd estimate the company's risk at somewhere between $2 and $5 million. Your counteroffer should start at $750,000, minimum. The number made my head spin. That seems excessive. It's not. Consider what you're giving them in exchange. Your silence, your agreement not to sue, your cooperation in keeping this out of the press. That's worth a significant premium. Plus, you need to protect yourself financially because Derek's criminal restitution will take years, and you may never see a dime of marital assets from him. James opened a file on his computer and started typing. Here's what I propose. We draft a counter-offer to the company that includes full medical coverage for Derek's cardiac care with no cap, $750,000 in settlement, a structured payout over 3 years to minimize tax impact, guaranteed references for Rita and Marcus to protect them from retaliation, mandatory policy changes including quarterly audits and anonymous whistleblower protections, and a clause preventing the company from pursuing you for any of Derek's debts or restitution. Obligations. Can we actually demand all that? We can demand anything we want. Whether they'll agree is another question, but you won't know unless you ask. And Mrs. Hayes, you have significant leverage here. The evidence your coworkers provided is damning. If this goes to trial or becomes public, Westview Technology Solutions will suffer damage far exceeding what they'd pay you to make it go away. He pulled up another document. Simultaneously, you need to file for divorce immediately. Oregon is a no-fault state, but we want to establish your filing date before any of Derek's criminal proceedings begin. That protects you from being liable for his legal fees or criminal fines. We'll also file for a restraining order preventing him from accessing marital assets or making major financial decisions without court approval. How long does all this take? The divorce itself, 6 months minimum in Oregon. But we can have protective orders in place within days. The company negotiation could take anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months depending on how hard they push back. He looked at me seriously. This is going to be difficult, Mrs. Hayes. Derek will likely contest the divorce terms. The company will try to lowball you multiple times before agreeing to fair terms. And once Derek's criminal case proceeds, there will be media attention. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Vanessa crying in the coffee shop, about Derek lying in his hospital bed, about the life I'd built that was now rubble around my feet. I don't know if I'm prepared. But I know I don't have a choice. Moving forward is the only option. James smiled for the first time. That's the right answer. Now, let's talk about my fee structure. We spent another 30 minutes discussing costs and payment arrangements. James agreed to defer part of his fee until after the company's settlement came through, which eased my immediate financial pressure. He'd also reached out to a criminal attorney he knew who specialized in white-collar crime, someone who could advise me on how Derek's case might impact our divorce proceedings. By the time I left his office, I had a stack of documents to sign and a clear timeline of next steps. File for divorce by end of week. Respond to the company's offer with our counterproposal by Monday. Secure all joint accounts and assets by Tuesday. Meet with the criminal attorney by Wednesday. It was overwhelming, but it was also clarifying. I had a plan now, a path forward through the chaos. Thomas and Rita were waiting at a nearby sandwich shop when I emerged. They'd ordered food for all 3 of us, correctly guessing I'd forgotten to eat. How did it go? Rita asked as I slid into the booth beside her. James thinks I should demand $750,000 from the company. Thomas whistled low. Bold. I like it. He also thinks they'll eventually agree because the alternative is worse for them. I took a bite of my sandwich, realizing I was starving. But it means this is going to get ugly before it gets better. It was always going to get ugly, Marcus said. He joined us while I was in the meeting, looking tired but determined. Patricia tried to separate Rita and me this afternoon, interview us individually about what we'd shared with you. We refused unless our own lawyer was present. Did you get a lawyer? Called one right after. Employment attorney who handles wrongful termination and whistleblower cases. She's reviewing our employment contracts now. He grinned. Turns out threatening to punish employees for reporting fraud is a great way to invite legal trouble. Rita leaned forward. There's something else you should know. After you left the coffee shop, I went back in. Vanessa was still there, crying. I sat down with her. Why would you do that? Because despite everything, she's another one of Derek's victims. Maybe a willing victim, but still. And because she's pregnant and scared, and I thought she deserved to hear from someone other than Derek about what working with him was really like. What did you tell her? The truth. That he's manipulative and selfish. That he'll throw anyone under the bus to protect himself. That the charming, generous boyfriend she thinks she knows is a performance he puts on when it benefits him. Rita paused. I also told her about the other women. My sandwich turned to sawdust in my mouth. What other women? You didn't know? Rita looked stricken. I'm sorry, I assumed from all the evidence that you'd seen the earlier messages. Vanessa wasn't Derek's first affair. There were at least 2 others in the past 3 years. Both also coworkers. Both ended when the women figured out he was never actually going to leave you. The restaurant seemed to tilt. 3 affairs. Derek had 3 affairs that you know about. I'm sorry, Rita whispered. I thought you knew. Thomas put his hand on my arm. Lauren, breathe. This doesn't change anything about your current situation. It's just additional confirmation that Derek is exactly who we thought he was. But it did change things. Not legally or strategically, but emotionally. One affair could be explained away as a moment of weakness, a mistake born from stress or opportunity. 3 affairs were a pattern. 3 affairs meant Derek had been lying to me not for 8 months but for years. Our entire marriage was a sham. Did these other women get pregnant too? I heard myself ask. Not that I know of. But Derek was careful with them in ways he apparently wasn't with Vanessa. Which suggests something shifted in his thinking, maybe that he actually wanted a child with her or maybe just that he got careless. I pushed my sandwich away, no longer hungry. I need to update James Cordell about this. If there's a pattern of affairs, it might affect the divorce proceedings. There's documentation, Marcus offered. I've seen some of the email exchanges in the systems I audited. I can pull copies if you need them. Do it. Everything. Every affair, every lie, every piece of evidence that shows Derek's been betraying me for years. My voice was steadier than I felt. If we're burning this down, we're burning all of it. The afternoon passed in a blur of phone calls and planning. James Cordell was unsurprised by the revelation of multiple affairs and immediately adjusted his divorce strategy to emphasize Derek's pattern of infidelity and deception. Patricia Whitmore called 3 times, each message more urgent than the last, clearly realizing that I wasn't going to accept their initial offer quietly. By evening, I was back home, surrounded by documents and plans, feeling simultaneously empowered and exhausted. Bethany had stopped by with dinner and moral support, helping me sort through everything that needed to happen in the next few days. You're doing the right thing, she said as we packed up my most important documents and valuables. James had suggested I move them somewhere safe in case Derek got released from the hospital and tried to access the house. It feels overwhelming now, but you're protecting yourself. That's what matters. I keep thinking about those other women. The ones before Vanessa. Did they confront their husbands? Did they try to work it out? Or did they just walk away quietly? Does it matter? You're not them. You get to make your own choice about how to handle this. I chose to fight. I'm just not sure I have enough fight in me for everything that's coming. Bethany squeezed my hand. You don't have to have it all now. You just need enough for tomorrow, and then the day after that. One step at a time. That night, alone in the house that no longer felt like home, I allowed myself one final moment of grief for the marriage I'd thought I had. Then I packed it away with all the other lies and losses, making room for whatever came next. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. This is Derek's mother. We need to talk about what you're doing to my son. Helen Hayes arrived at my doorstep the next morning without warning, her finger pressed firmly on the doorbell until I answered. She stood on my porch in a camel-colored coat and pearl earrings, her silver hair styled in the same precise bob she'd worn for the entire 6 years I'd known her. Her expression was a mixture of grief and righteous anger that made my stomach clench. We need to talk, she announced, brushing past me into the house before I could respond. Immediately. I closed the door and followed her into the living room, where she stood with her arms crossed, surveying the space like a general assessing a battlefield. Helen, I wasn't expecting you. Clearly. Otherwise you might have prepared some explanation for why you're destroying my son while he's lying in a hospital bed recovering from a heart attack. Her voice was ice. Derek's sister called me last night. She said you walked out on him. That you've hired lawyers. That you're planning to take everything and leave him with nothing. Did Chloe also tell you why I'm doing those things? She said there were accusations. Office gossip about some woman from his work. But Lauren, marriages go through difficult periods. You don't abandon your husband when he's at his most vulnerable over rumors and speculation. I moved to the dining table where I'd left some of the evidence folders. They're not rumors. Derek has been having an affair with a coworker named Vanessa Morgan for 8 months. She's pregnant with his child. He's also embezzled over $200,000 from his company. The police have been notified. He's going to face criminal charges. Helen's face went rigid. That's absurd. Derek would never do those things. Someone has obviously deceived you, turned you against him when he needs you most. I met Vanessa yesterday. She confirmed everything. Derek's assistant has documented evidence of the affair. The company accountant has traced every fraudulent transaction. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos of the financial records. Would you like to see the proof? I don't need to see anything. I know my son. He's made mistakes, certainly, but he would never betray his family this way. Helen's voice wavered slightly, the first crack in her armor. You're confused. The stress of his medical emergency has clouded your judgment. The only thing that's clouded is the past 6 years of my marriage, where I believed I knew the man I was living with. I sat down, suddenly tired of standing. Helen, I loved Derek. I built my life around him. Finding out he's been lying to me about almost everything is devastating. But it doesn't change the facts. Helen remained standing, her hands clutching her purse strap. So you're just going to throw away your wedding vows? For better or worse, in sickness and in health? Those words meant nothing to you? They meant everything to me. But Derek broke those vows long before his heart attack. He chose to be unfaithful. He chose to steal. He chose to build a secret life while I believed we were partners. I looked at her directly. Where were you when he needed guidance? When did he learn that lying and cheating were acceptable ways to handle life's pressures? How dare you blame his parents for his choices? Helen's face flushed with anger. We raised Derek to be a good man. If he's made mistakes, that's on him, not us. But abandoning him now makes you complicit in whatever happens next. What happens next is Derek faces consequences for his actions. He'll lose his job, probably serve probation or prison time, and have to repay everything he stole. Those consequences exist whether I stay married to him or not. But if you stay, you can help him through it. Stand by him. Show the world that he has a supportive wife who believes in redemption. Helen finally sat down across from me, her voice shifting from angry to pleading. Lauren, I'm asking you to think about this carefully. Derek made mistakes, yes. But everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't the same as staying married to someone who's betrayed you repeatedly. Derek didn't make one mistake, Helen. He made hundreds of choices, every single day, to continue lying to me. Every morning he kissed me goodbye and went to work where he stole money and slept with another woman. Every night he came home and pretended to be a faithful husband. That's not a mistake. That's a sustained campaign of deception. Helen pulled a tissue from her purse and dabbed at her eyes. What about children? You and Derek always talked about starting a family. Are you really going to throw that away? The question hit harder than she probably intended. Derek is starting a family. With Vanessa. She's due in about 6 months. So that particular dream is dead regardless of what I decide about the marriage. The color drained from Helen's face. A baby? He got that woman pregnant? That woman has a name, and yes. Derek is going to be a father. Just not with me. Helen sat in stunned silence for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. I had no idea it had gone that far. Chloe didn't mention a pregnancy. Chloe probably doesn't know yet. I only found out 2 days ago. I paused, then decided Helen deserved the full truth. And apparently Vanessa isn't Derek's first affair. There have been at least 2 others over the past 3 years. Derek has a pattern of infidelity that predates his current relationship. That can't be true. It is. His assistant documented all of them. Derek has been serially unfaithful throughout our entire marriage, and I was too trusting to see the signs. Helen aged 10 years in that moment. Her shoulders slumped, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. I don't understand. His father and I, we've been married 43 years. We taught both our children about commitment and loyalty. How did Derek become someone I don't recognize? I've been asking myself the same question. How did I marry someone capable of this level of deception? But the truth is, we probably both saw what we wanted to see. You saw the successful son who made you proud. I saw the loving husband who completed me. The real Derek was hidden underneath those performances. What am I supposed to tell people? Helen's question was barely a whisper. My friends, our family, everyone who celebrated your wedding and thought you two were the perfect couple? Tell them the truth. Tell them Derek made choices that destroyed his marriage and his career. Tell them I'm doing what I need to do to protect myself and move forward. I softened my tone slightly. Helen, I know this is painful for you. Derek is your son, and you love him despite his flaws. But I can't sacrifice my future to protect his reputation or make your life easier. Do you hate him? Helen looked at me with genuine curiosity. After everything he's done, do you hate my son? I considered the question carefully. No. I hate what he did. I hate the lies and the betrayal and the casual cruelty of it all. But Derek himself? I mostly feel sad for him. He had a good life, a solid marriage, a successful career. And he threw it all away for temporary excitement and stolen money. That's not someone to hate. That's someone to pity. Helen stood slowly, gathering her composure around herself like armor. I should go. I need to talk to Derek, to hear his side of all this. He's still in the hospital. The police want to question him again once he's medically cleared. He'll probably tell you I'm lying or exaggerating. He'll make himself the victim and me the villain. That's what manipulators do. He's still my son, Helen said quietly. I have to at least hear what he has to say. I understand. But Helen, when you talk to him, pay attention to what he doesn't say. Notice how he deflects blame. Now let's discuss the settlement terms my client is proposing. One of the attorneys, a man named Richard something, pulled out a folder. We've reviewed your demands. Some are reasonable. Others are frankly excessive given the circumstances. Which specific terms do you find excessive? James asked calmly. The monetary amount, for starters. $750,000 is far beyond what's justified for a settlement of this nature. Really? Let's examine your liability exposure. James pulled out his own documents. You have documented evidence from Ms. Vasquez that she reported suspicious expenses 8 months ago. You have witness statements from multiple employees who observed Derek's affair with another employee, creating a hostile work environment that you failed to address. You have evidence that your financial controls were so lax that a single manager could steal over $200,000 across 18 months without detection. He laid photos on the table, printed screenshots from the evidence Marcus and Rita had provided. If this goes public, if Mrs. Hayes files a civil suit, if the employees who tried to report problems come forward with wrongful termination claims, you're looking at millions in damages, legal fees, and reputation costs. $750,000 is a bargain. Patricia's jaw tightened. We're prepared to offer $400,000. That's our final number. Then we're done here. James stood, gathering his papers. Mrs. Hayes will file suit next week. We'll see you in court. Wait. The other attorney, whose name I'd already forgotten, held up a hand. Let's not be hasty. There's room for negotiation here. We sat back down. For the next 2 hours, we argued over numbers and terms. The company wanted to reduce the payout and eliminate the policy change requirements. James refused to budge on the reforms but showed flexibility on the payment structure. I watched the negotiation like a spectator at a tennis match, fascinated by the strategic dance. Finally, Patricia called for a private conference with her attorneys. They left the room for 20 minutes. When they returned, Patricia looked like someone who'd been forced to swallow something bitter. $600,000, paid in structured installments over 3 years. Full medical coverage for Derek's cardiac care with a $200,000 cap. Guaranteed references from Ms. Vasquez and Mr. Chen with no retaliation. Quarterly financial audits for the next 5 years with results reported to the board. Anonymous whistleblower hotline implemented within 90 days. Mrs. Hayes signs a comprehensive NDA and releases all claims against the company. James looked at me. This was my decision. I could push for more, risk them walking away and having to pursue litigation. Or I could accept what was on the table and have guaranteed financial security. What about Derek's access to the funds? I asked. I don't want him able to claim any of this settlement as marital property. Patricia nodded. The agreement will specify that all payments are made solely to you as compensation for damages you personally suffered. It's not marital property. And the policy changes are binding? You'll actually implement them? We'll implement them and provide quarterly reports to your attorney confirming compliance. If we fail to do so, you can petition the court to enforce the agreement. I looked at Thomas, who nodded slightly. At Rita, who gave me a small smile. At Marcus, who mouthed, "Take it." I agree to the terms, I said. But I want it in writing today. No delays, no time for you to reconsider. Our counsel will draft the agreement this afternoon. You can review it with Mr. Cordell tomorrow, and we'll execute it by Friday. As we left the building, I felt like I was floating. $600,000. It wasn't what we'd asked for, but it was life-changing money. Enough to start over completely, to never have to worry about Derek's debts, to build something entirely my own. You did good in there, Thomas said as we stood in the parking lot. Stayed calm, asked the right questions, knew when to accept a fair deal. I couldn't have done any of this without you three. You risked your jobs to help me. Rita hugged me tightly. We risked our jobs to do the right thing. And honestly, if the company had fired us for it, we'd have had a hell of a wrongful termination case. Marcus checked his phone. Speaking of which, I just got an email from HR. My position is being restructured, but they're offering me a different role with the same salary. Looks like the company is trying to keep me happy. Same here, Rita confirmed. They're moving me to a different department, away from the executive floor. Which is fine by me. I never want to be anyone's assistant again. James shook hands with all of us. I'll review the settlement agreement tomorrow and make sure everything we discussed is included. Assuming it's clean, you should have your first payment within 30 days. As everyone dispersed to their cars, I stood alone for a moment in the parking lot, looking up at the building where Derek had worked for 5 years. Where he'd stolen money and carried on affairs and destroyed the life we'd built together. In a strange way, I was grateful to this place. If Derek hadn't been so greedy, if the audit hadn't caught him, if his heart hadn't failed under the pressure, I might have gone on for years not knowing the truth. My phone rang. Vanessa's number appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Lauren? It's Vanessa. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. What do you want? I wanted you to know that I'm not seeing Derek anymore. After we talked, after Rita explained what he was really like, I realized you were right. I was just another person he used. Good for you. That doesn't change anything that happened. I know. But I wanted to apologize anyway. I knew he was married. I told myself it didn't matter, that if your marriage was really strong he wouldn't have been interested in me. But that was just an excuse. I helped him hurt you, and I'm sorry. The apology was unexpected and probably inadequate, but I could hear genuine regret in her voice. What are you going to do about the baby? I'm keeping it. But I'm not under any illusions that Derek is going to be a good father. I'm already talking to a lawyer about establishing custody and child support terms that protect my child from his manipulation. Smart. I'm also going into therapy. Because apparently I have a pattern of choosing unavailable men and convincing myself I can fix them. My therapist says I need to work on that before the baby comes. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of respect for Vanessa. She was young and foolish, but she was at least trying to learn from her mistakes. Good luck with that. And with the baby. Thank you. And Lauren? I really am sorry. For whatever that's worth. After we hung up, I drove to the house I'd shared with Derek. The divorce papers had been filed, and the court had granted a temporary order giving me exclusive use of the property until the divorce was finalized. I'd been avoiding the house, but I needed to face it eventually. Inside, everything looked the same. The furniture we'd chosen together. The photos on the walls from our wedding and various vacations. The coffee maker Derek used every morning. It was like a museum of a life that no longer existed. I walked through each room slowly, saying goodbye to the woman who'd lived here. The naive wife who'd believed in forever. The trusting partner who'd never questioned her husband's late nights. The hopeful future mother who'd thought she was building something lasting. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, wiser, more cautious. Someone who knew that trust had to be earned, that love without honesty was just pretty words, that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was walk away. In the bedroom, I opened Derek's closet and started pulling his clothes off the hangers. Everything he owned was going into trash bags and getting donated. I wasn't keeping reminders of him in my space. By the time I finished, 6 large bags sat by the front door, ready for pickup. I was boxing up the last of Derek's belongings from the bathroom when I heard a key in the front door. Derek stepped inside, looking gaunt and exhausted, still wearing the clothes he'd been arrested in. He froze when he saw me. Lauren. I didn't expect you to be here. It's my house now. Court order. You're actually not supposed to be here without permission. I just wanted to get some of my things. I'm staying with my mother temporarily. He saw the bags by the door. I see you've already packed for me. Consider it a courtesy. Everything you need is there. Clothes, toiletries, some books. The rest stays with the house. Derek moved further into the room, his movements careful, like someone still recovering from trauma. We need to talk about what happens next. No, we don't. My lawyer is handling everything. You'll get served with the divorce papers if you haven't already. Lauren, please. Just give me 5 minutes to explain. Explain what? The affairs? The stealing? The lies? I've heard enough explanations to last a lifetime. I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed everything good between us. But I never stopped loving you. Everything I did, it was because I felt trapped, suffocated by the pressure of trying to be the person everyone expected me to be. His words had the practiced quality of something rehearsed, probably with his attorney or therapist. The old Lauren might have wavered, might have wanted to understand and forgive. The new Lauren saw it for what it was, manipulation. You felt trapped, I repeated flatly. So you stole money, slept with multiple women, and got one of them pregnant. That's your explanation? When you say it like that, it sounds calculated. But it wasn't. Each choice seemed small at the time, justifiable. I didn't set out to become this person. You didn't set out not to become this person either. That's the problem, Derek. You made hundreds of choices that hurt people, and you never once considered stopping until you got caught. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. What do you want from me? You're taking the house, probably half of everything I have left. You're getting your settlement from the company. I'll be lucky if I don't go to prison. Haven't I been punished enough? This isn't about punishment. This is about me protecting myself and moving forward with my life. What happens to you is the consequence of your own actions. So that's it? 6 years of marriage, and you're just walking away without looking back. I'm walking away because you gave me no reason to stay. Every foundation we built together was contaminated by your lies. There's nothing left to save. Derek looked up at me, and for just a moment, I saw something genuine in his expression. Not remorse exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. I really did love you, you know. That part was real. Maybe it was. But love without honesty is just another form of betrayal. And I deserve better than that. I picked up my car keys and headed for the door. Derek called after me. Where are you going? Forward, I said simply. I'm going forward. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of my new apartment in Northwest Portland, a small but bright space with hardwood floors and windows that caught the afternoon sun. The first settlement payment had cleared 3 weeks after signing the agreement, and I'd used it to secure this lease, furnish the space with pieces I'd chosen myself, and upgrade my photography equipment. The rest sat in accounts I controlled entirely, no joint signatures, no shared access. The divorce had been finalized last month. Derek hadn't contested the terms, probably because his attorney advised him that fighting would only make things worse. He'd pleaded guilty to the embezzlement charges and received 3 years in prison with the possibility of early release after 18 months. His mother had stopped calling after the sentencing, finally accepting that her son's consequences were his own making. I'd heard through Rita that Vanessa had given birth to a daughter in April. Derek would miss the first year of his child's life behind bars, which seemed fitting somehow. He'd chosen short-term gratification over long-term responsibility, and now he'd live with that choice. My phone buzzed with a text from Bethany. Lunch tomorrow? Want to celebrate your gallery showing next week. The gallery showing. My photographs would be displayed at a small but respected gallery in the Pearl District, the same neighborhood where I'd confronted Vanessa in that coffee shop. The owner had seen my portfolio online and reached out, interested in my landscape work. I'd spent the past 4 months preparing for the exhibition, pouring my grief and anger and eventual healing into images of Oregon's coast, mountains, and forests. Thomas, Rita, and Marcus were all planning to attend the opening. We'd stayed in touch, an unlikely friendship forged in crisis. Rita had been promoted at Westview and was dating someone from the IT department. Marcus had actually left the company for a better position at a competitor, his whistleblower status making him valuable to organizations that valued ethical oversight. Thomas was retiring at the end of the year, finally ready to step away from corporate life. I walked to the window and looked out at the street below. People hurried past with coffee cups and shopping bags, living their ordinary lives, unaware of the extraordinary transformations happening all around them. I was one of them now, just another person rebuilding after loss, finding strength in starting over. My laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, displaying an email I'd been debating whether to send. It was addressed to a photography collective in Seattle that organized international exhibitions. They'd expressed interest in my work, suggested I might consider a residency program that would take me to Iceland next spring to photograph the northern lights and volcanic landscapes. Iceland. A place Derek and I had once talked about visiting together, back when I believed our future was shared. Now it could be mine alone, a journey I'd take on my own terms, capturing beauty that belonged only to me. I clicked send before I could second-guess myself. The afternoon stretched ahead with no obligations, no demands, no one to answer to but myself. It was still strange sometimes, this freedom. I'd spent so many years arranging my life around Derek's schedule, his preferences, his needs. Learning to prioritize myself felt revolutionary and uncomfortable in equal measure. My phone rang. An unknown number, which I normally wouldn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Hayes? This is Dr. Harper from St. Catherine's. I hope you don't mind me calling. I wanted to check in and see how you were doing. The kindness in his voice brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'm doing well, actually. Better than I expected. I'm glad to hear that. I often wonder about the patients and families who come through our ICU. Your situation was particularly difficult, and I wanted you to know that I think you handled it with remarkable grace. I didn't feel graceful at the time. I felt like I was drowning. That's usually when grace matters most. When we choose to keep moving forward despite feeling overwhelmed. He paused. I also wanted to tell you something. Derek came in for a follow-up appointment last week before his sentencing. He asked about you, whether I'd heard how you were doing. What did you tell him? I told him that doctor-patient confidentiality extends to family members, even estranged ones. But between you and me, I got the sense that he finally understands what he lost. Not the money or the career, but you. The person who would have stood by him through almost anything, if only he'd been honest. That realization came too late. Most important realizations do. But perhaps it means something that he's capable of it at all. Dr. Harper cleared his throat. Anyway, I just wanted to reach out. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Hayes. Or should I say Ms. Hayes? Actually, I'm going back to my maiden name. Lauren Cooper. It feels right, reclaiming who I was before all this. After we hung up, I sat with that thought. Lauren Cooper. The name I'd been born with, set aside when I married, now mine again. It represented more than just legal documents and updated identification. It represented choosing myself, my own identity independent of any relationship or role. The sun was setting over Portland, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. I grabbed my camera and headed to the roof of my building, where residents were allowed access to a small terrace. From here, I could see the city spreading out in all directions, lights beginning to twinkle as evening descended. I'd taken hundreds of sunset photos over the years, but tonight felt different. This wasn't about capturing beauty for its own sake or documenting a moment to share with someone else. This was about witnessing my own new beginning, marking the transformation from who I'd been into who I was becoming. Through the viewfinder, the city looked both familiar and strange, like seeing something for the first time even though I'd lived here for years. Maybe that's what healing felt like. Not forgetting what happened, but learning to see the world with fresh eyes, finding possibility in spaces that once held only pain. I thought about Derek in prison, about Vanessa raising her daughter alone, about Helen grappling with her son's failures, about all the lives that had been disrupted by choices made in secret. Their stories would continue without me, following trajectories I'd never witness. That separation was necessary and right. My story was my own now. Not defined by betrayal or divorce or settlements, but by what I chose to create moving forward. The gallery show was just the beginning. The Iceland residency could open doors to opportunities I'd never imagined. And somewhere ahead, maybe years from now, there might even be love again. Real love, built on honesty and mutual respect, with someone who understood that trust wasn't something to be taken for granted. But for now, I had this moment. This sunset. This camera in my hands and this city spread out before me. I had my freedom, my future, and the hard-won knowledge that I was strong enough to survive losing everything and still find reasons to keep going. I took the shot, the shutter clicking softly in the evening air. Then I lowered the camera and simply watched the sun disappear below the horizon, marking the end of one day and the promise of another tomorrow. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.